following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Hello and a very warm welcome to all News 9 viewers. I'm Neha Bhan. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of this hour. We begin with the war between Israel and Hamas that has now entered its 64th day. Let's get you the latest update from the war front. US vetoes UNSC resolution on ceasefire in Gaza. Palestine slams US veto of UNSC resolution calling for an immediate humanitarian pause in Gaza. Israeli bombardment of the Gaza Strip continues, dozens dead in Khan Yunis. Israel's military has killed 47 athletes during war. That is what Palestinian Olympic Committee has said. Now Israel forces raid Nablus in north of West Bank. Food and water shortage situation is getting worse for Gazans. That's the latest coming in from day 64 of the Israel-Hamas war. The Israeli military struck 450 Gaza targets in 24 hours on Friday, roughly double the figure it's typically reported since the end of the truce with Hamas. Now, it marks a new expansion of the war, with the UN warning that Gaza is teetering on a complete societal collapse. Take a look.
The Israeli military appears to be sharply increasing its strikes in Gaza, marking a possible new expansion of the war. And with hospitals overrun and food running out, the UN is warning that Gaza teeters on the edge of a total societal collapse. This footage is said to show Israeli troops in the city of Khan Yunis. The Israeli military says it hit 450 targets in Gaza over 24 hours as of Friday. That's double what they've typically reported since the truce reached with Hamas fell apart last week. Elsewhere in the same city, Palestinians who've been forced from their homes into a tent city are telling Reuters journalists their fears. This man's wife is on dialysis but has had to reduce her treatments. We can be patient with hunger, he says, but how long can his wife wait to be treated? How long can his kids wait for something to drink? They keep saying, "Dad, I want to eat. Dad, I want to eat." He says they're down to just one meal a day. The vast majority of Gazans have been rendered homeless by the war. Meanwhile, in Israel, the human toll is also continuing to climb. This is the funeral for a 25-year-old Israeli soldier killed in the fighting, who was the son of a minister in Israel's war cabinet. As of Friday, about 100 Israeli soldiers have been reported killed. Hamas says the minister's son was killed by a bomb rigged to one of their tunnels. The militant group also reported Friday that a hostage was killed in a separate incident during a failed Israeli rescue attempt. The Israeli military declined to comment on what it called psychological warfare.
In Gaza, an unprecedented surge in infectious diseases has been reported as displaced Palestinians seek refuge in crowded shelters. Now, the influx is exacerbating the strain on healthcare facilities and professionals already overwhelmed by the ongoing Israeli offensive. Take a look at this report.
Increasing numbers of displaced Palestinians are falling victim to deadly infections. And there are fears that hepatitis, diarrhea and respiratory illnesses could cause more deaths than bombs and missiles. Here in the south of the Gaza Strip, Dina Abu Taubsh takes her daughter to a clinic in Khan Yunis.
My daughter is suffering from fever, cough and cold. We were displaced to these schools, and there are many children here. The children have caught infections because of overcrowding. The situation is difficult for my daughter, but also for other children.
But it's not only the health infrastructure that is overwhelmed. Other critical infrastructure is also lacking, and there's not enough drinkable water or food. Many Gazans have resorted to eating just one meal a day, prioritising children. As more families flee the conflict, poor sanitation is becoming widespread across the besieged strip, causing hygiene-related diseases such as lice infestation and scabies, making it harder for health authorities to control disease outbreaks.
At present, there's no way of controlling the spread of infection, especially with the war continuing. There's a lack of water suitable for human consumption, along with a shortage of energy and electricity to operate generators. The overcrowding and transfer of people to shelters, and the failure to provide personal supplies to limit the spread of diseases.
Health organisations have repeatedly sounded the alarm that the situation is becoming deadlier by the day. Dina's had to wait for hours to buy essentials like medicine for her sick daughter. About 1.8 million Gazans are now displaced, and hopes that the situation could improve are dwindling.
While the Israel-Hamas war is causing immense humanitarian tragedy, there are also some stories where people from different sides of the spectrum come together to give out the message of peace. Israeli entrepreneur Ozben David and his Palestinian business partner Jalil Dabit run a restaurant together in Berlin. They run the restaurant with a firm belief that shared food and an eating culture can create friendships and overcome preconceived differences.
And linsen, we make it also with
Jalil.
A smiley.
Hi Jalil, nice to meet you.
Our vision is to show the people that Palestinian and Israeli or people from different background can work together and be really good friends.
Sweet potato supposed to be there.
Can you show it?
Each one has his own way to make hummus, and we can learn from the hummus and from the experience of sharing instead of fighting on something, where we keep and create. We have the same idea of how family structure will be like. We have the same idea about a lot of things that we sharing food that we are fighting when we could share together. So many things, so many visions that we share together, and I think that this is the place where it's remind you, and the future, it will come.
Egypt's President Abdul Fattah al-Sisi is standing for a third term in office. With the war in Gaza having distracted voters from Egypt's growing economic hardships, al-Sisi's win seems to be a foregone conclusion.
Egypt's President Abdul Fattah al-Sisi is poised to win 6 more years in power, a result that isn't in doubt. That's despite growing despair about soaring prices, which have stirred criticism of Sisi's record on the economy and his crackdowns on dissent. In power for close to a decade, the former army chief presents himself as a guarantor of stability in a volatile neighbourhood. 2 wars on Egypt's borders, in Gaza and Sudan, have hardly hurt that image. Sisi announced his campaign for the December 10th to 12th election would be curtailed to save funds for aid to Gaza, though giant posters of his face are everywhere. If only he'd been content with the 10 years, says Mohammed Anwar Sadat, a moderate opposition figure and former member of parliament.
Before the events of Gaza, the pressure on economic and living conditions, as well as other issues, were questioned by people and had created a state of anger against President Sisi and big reservations about his policies. Since the beginning of the events in Gaza, there has been a state of calm and tranquility in the minds of many, who started to feel it was better if the current president continues.
Sisi has overseen a crackdown since leading the 2013 ouster of Egypt's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood. Sisi and the military establishment are tight, while the Brotherhood has been driven underground or abroad. The constitution was amended in 2019 to let Sisi stand for a third time, and it extended the presidential term to 6 years from 4. Sisi was declared winner with 97% of the vote in the previous 2 elections. But Egyptian authorities seem wary of a public backlash this time, so 3 candidates have qualified to stand, all of them low profile and muted in their criticism. This is Medhat Az-Zahed, head of the Socialist Popular Alliance Party, which is boycotting the vote.
They needed a degree of competition because of pressure concerning freedoms and human rights in Egypt and pent-up popular frustrations. So there was an attempt to release these frustrations through peaceful means, so long as the ceiling is defined.
A national dialogue earlier this year allowed the airing of a few critical views, and some prisoners were pardoned. But arrests have continued. Parliament is dominated by Sisi's supporters, and his allies control the media. A campaign by leftist politician Ahmed al-Tantawi, the most prominent potential opposition candidate, briefly tapped into pent-up discontent. But he dropped out of the race, citing pressure from pro-government forces. He's now facing a judicial case on allegations of using illicit means to collect endorsements. Sisi's campaign office did not respond to requests for comment.
The current president can get at most 1% of the votes out of real support, and I expect he can get 10% of votes using the same ways he used to gather endorsements. But as for the sweeping majority of the Egyptian people, they were waiting for a serious candidate.
Fears about the economy have not gone away. The state has crowded out the private sector. Egypt's debts have ballooned after a spending spree on mega-projects like a new capital east of Cairo. And prices have rocketed for ordinary Egyptians, like Ahmed Khudair, who had this message for Sisi.
We ask him to lower the prices a bit for people to afford them, because families have 5 or 6 members, so lowering the prices would help people and help them live. I call on people before anything, before focusing on prices, to go vote for the President of the nation, because this way he will help people. He's already helping people.
Now, Vladimir Putin has announced his candidature for the 2024 presidential elections, scheduled to take place on the 17th of March. A win, which is all but certain, would allow Putin a 5th term in office and give him another 6 years as he looks to prolong his grip on Russia. This report tells you more.
Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday told soldiers who had fought in Ukraine that he would run for a 5th term in the 2024 election. It's a move that would allow the former KGB spy to stay in power until at least 2030. Putin was handed the presidency by Boris Yeltsin in 1999 and has already served as president for longer than any other ruler of Russia since Joseph Stalin. He confirmed his bid for re-election while meeting with war veterans to award them Russia's highest military honor.
I will not hide that I have had different thoughts at different times, but it's now time to make a decision. You are right. It is such a time when a decision needs to be made. I will run for the position of President of the Russian Federation.
For Putin, the election, which will take place in March 2024, is a formality. The The 71-year-old has no discernible successor, and with the support of the state-run media, and almost no mainstream public dissent, he is certain to win. On the streets of Moscow, support broadly favoured the incumbent.
I think that there is no better candidate than Vladimir Putin. I just can't imagine one. I will vote only for him.
In general, I approve. Hopefully, he has got enough health for this. There is a lot of negativity coming his way from different directions, but I believe that Russia needs him. I consider myself to be a patriot, a monarchist, to a certain extent, so I think it is necessary.
Opposition politicians say a handful of other unthreatening candidates will be put up to run against Putin and lose, in what they say has become a carefully stage-managed imitation of democracy. Despite the lack of competition, Putin faces the most serious set of challenges of any Kremlin leader since Mikhail Gorbachev grappled with the crumbling Soviet Union more than 3 decades ago. The war in Ukraine triggered the biggest confrontation with the West since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. The West casts Putin as a war criminal and a dictator who has led Russia into an imperial-style land grab in Ukraine. Subsequent sanctions have delivered the biggest external shock to the Russian economy for decades. And Putin also faced a failed mutiny by Russia's most powerful mercenary, Yevgeny Prigozhin, in June. Prigozhin was killed in a plane crash 2 months to the day after the mutiny.
The International Olympics Committee has allowed Russian and Belarusian athletes to take part in the 2024 Paris Olympics. The athletes will, however, not be allowed to participate under their respective country flags, but will have to compete as neutrals without any flags, emblems or anthems.
The International Olympic Committee said on Friday that Russians and Belarusians that qualify for the Paris Games next year will be able to compete as neutrals. The IOC said neutral athletes will only be able to participate in individual sports. Teams won't be allowed, and neither will flags, emblems, or anthems. Athletes who actively support the war in Ukraine or are contracted to the Russian or Belarusian military are not eligible. Athletes from the two countries had been banned from international competition following Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year. In March, the IOC handed down a set of recommendations for individual sports federations to allow competitors from the two countries to return. They've done so in most events. But athletics is the biggest sport of the Games. And World Athletics President Sebastian Coe says his federation isn't budging.
No, you may well see some neutral athletes from Russia and Belarus in Paris. They just won't be in athletics. We have a fixed position. That position hasn't altered.
Ukraine slammed the IOC's decision as shameful and says it's still mulling over whether its athletes will compete in Paris.
So for me, it's completely madness.
Ukrainian skeleton athlete Vadislav Haraskevich says he disagrees with the IOC's decision.
Let's pretend that I'm like, I don't know, German athlete, for example, or like Austrian athlete. And I'm competing and I like won medal and Russian guy second. IOC make photo and then this photo, Russian propaganda use this photo in some advertising. I don't want to be used in Russian propaganda.
Russian officials reacted with anger as well. Its sports minister said the conditions for participation are discriminatory. Out of 4,600 athletes who have qualified for the Games so far, 8 are Russians and 3 hold Belarusian passports. More than 60 Ukrainians have qualified. The IOC also said no government or state officials from Russia or Belarus will be invited or accredited for next year's Games. But athletes, it says, should not be punished for the actions of their governments.
U.S. President Joe Biden's son Hunter Biden has been charged in a long-running investigation into his taxes. He has been charged on 9 counts, including failure to file and pay taxes, evasion of assessment, and false or fraudulent tax return. This is the second indictment against Hunter Biden this year and strengthens the Republican camp, which has made this case a cornerstone to impeach President Biden.
Microsoft is a target for UK regulators once again. Antitrust officials in the UK said Friday they will review whether to launch a merger probe of the US tech giant. It's over Microsoft's partnership with ChatGPT maker.
US President Joe Biden's son Hunter is facing new criminal charges for allegedly failing to pay $1.4 million in taxes while spending millions on a lavish lifestyle. The Department of Justice on Thursday filed the indictment in a California court, slapping the younger Biden with 3 felony and 6 misdemeanor tax offenses. He faces up to 17 years in prison if convicted. According to the indictment, quote, the defendant engaged in a 4-year scheme to not pay at least $1.4 million in self-assessed federal taxes he owed for tax years 2016 through 2019. The document said Biden earned handsomely during this time, serving on the boards of a Ukrainian industrial conglomerate and a Chinese private equity fund, among other roles. But instead of paying taxes, he, quote, spent this money on drugs, escorts and girlfriends, luxury hotels and rental properties, exotic cars, clothing, and other items of a personal nature. A lawyer for Hunter Biden did not immediately reply to a request for comment, while the White House declined to comment. This is Special Counsel David Weiss's second indictment against Biden after an earlier plea deal was rejected by a judge. In October, Biden had pleaded not guilty to charges that he lied about his drug use while buying a handgun in the first criminal prosecution of a sitting U.S. president's child. The Justice Department said its investigation into the 53-year-old is ongoing. The indictments push the country towards an unprecedented spectacle next year, the son of a sitting president facing criminal charges while his father campaigns for re-election, likely against Republican frontrunner Donald Trump, who faces at least 3 upcoming criminal trials of his own.
Britain's antitrust regulator has said that it will review whether to launch a probe in the merger of Microsoft's multi-billion-dollar partnership with ChatGPT maker OpenAI. Now, this is the second time the regulator will be weighing in on the US software giant's operations.
Microsoft is a target for UK regulators once again. Antitrust officials in the UK said Friday they will review whether to launch a merger probe of the US tech giant. It's over Microsoft's partnership with ChatGPT maker OpenAI. Britain's Competition and Markets Authority, or CMA, said it will consider if the OpenAI tie-up has led to the creation of a merger situation. Only then will it decide on an official investigation. The move comes after an announcement last month that Microsoft will take a non-voting position on OpenAI's board. That followed a hectic boardroom battle which saw the sudden removal and return of OpenAI CEO and founder Sam Altman. Sources say Microsoft owns 49% of the for-profit operating company. The firm also committed to invest more than $10 billion into the ChatGPT maker. Microsoft said it will work closely with the CMA. OpenAI did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The same UK regulators looked at a separate competition issue around Microsoft earlier this year. It blocked the company's $69 billion buyout of Call of Duty video game maker Activision Blizzard. But it later changed its mind after Microsoft updated its acquisition plan.
US stocks closed higher on Friday, with the S&P 500 and Nasdaq notching their highest closing levels since early 2022. This after a robust US jobs report fueled investor optimism about a soft landing for the economy.
Wall Street's main indexes ended the week with gains on Friday, and the S&P 500 and Nasdaq closed at their highest levels since early 2022. Fueling that, a robust jobs report that lifted investor optimism about a soft landing for the economy. The Dow added more than 0.3%, while the S&P and NASDAQ each rose roughly 0.4. It was the sixth straight week of gains for the S&P, the index's longest weekly winning streak since November 2019. Friday's non-farm payrolls report from the Labor Department showed the economy added more jobs than expected in November. That led investors to shift bets about when the Federal Reserve would cut rates. The consensus now May instead of March. But what the market expects and what the data-dependent Fed actually does may not match up, says Tom Hanlon, National Investment Strategist at U.S. Bank Wealth Management.
The Fed meets next week. They conclude their meeting on Wednesday. We'll get a new revised outlook from what the Fed sees for interest rates. But that gap between what investors are looking for and the Fed is putting forth in terms of their expectations is the biggest driver for market volatility through the remainder of this year and into 2024.
Other data showed U.S. consumers felt inflation pressures easing, snapping 4 straight months of negative sentiment. In company news, shares of megacaps, Nvidia, and Meta platforms each gained nearly 2%, while Alphabet dipped 1.4%, giving up gains after an AI-led rally in the previous session. Honeywell shed 1.6% after the industrial firm said it would buy air conditioner maker Carrier Global's security business for over $4.9 billion. Carrier shares rose 4.5%. And Paramount Global soared 12% after reports of takeover interest in the media company. Peer Warner Brothers Discovery jumped 6%.
Let's now bring you a roundup of all the business-related developments from the continent of Africa. Take a look.
Here's what's been making the business headlines in sub-Saharan Africa this week. The African Development Bank is drawing up plans for $1 billion of hydropower upgrades in Africa, bank officials said on Monday. The refurbishments at 12 plants in countries including Nigeria, South Africa and Democratic Republic of Congo are expected to yield an extra 570 megawatts in total. That's on a continent where capacity is often unable to meet surging power needs. Shell has an imminent $5 billion investment opportunity in the offshore Bonga North oil project, a spokesperson for Nigeria's president said on Thursday. A statement said the oil major also pledged to spend a further $1 billion in 5 to 10 years to boost natural gas output for domestic supplies and exports. Anglo American aims to cut capital expenditure by $1.8 billion by 2026, it said on Friday, as it grapples with a fall in demand for most of the metals it mines and a write-down for its British fertilizer project. The global miner announced that production will be reduced at its Kumba iron unit in South Africa, where stockpiles had grown to 9 million metric tons by September following worsening rail bottlenecks. Cost-cutting measures in South Africa will also focus on higher margin production for its platinum group metals operations. Societe Generale has agreed to sell 2 subsidiaries in Burkina Faso and Mozambique to Pan-African banking group Vista, the company said on Thursday. France's third biggest listed bank has been retreating from Africa as it tries to sharpen its use of capital and has previously announced sales in Congo Republic, Equatorial Guinea, Mauritania and Chad. And finally, up to $1 billion will be available to boost African vaccine manufacturing as part of a new scheme set up by Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, the global health organization said on Thursday. The funding is left over from the COVAX initiative, which aimed to help vaccines reach the poorest countries during the global health crisis. The African Union has set a target for the continent's vaccine manufacturing industry to supply over 60% of its total vaccine needs by 2040, up from around 1% now.
A huge clam that was on the verge of extinction has made a comeback with a surge in numbers in waters of Croatia. Now the sighting brings hope of a revival of the species. Our next report tells you more.
This huge clam is back from the brink of extinction. It had fallen victim to a deadly pathogen in the Mediterranean in recent years, with only around 10 being known to scientists in Croatia. Now, marine biologists say they've seen a surge in numbers. This is Croatia's Istria Peninsula, It's home to the clams, which are known as the noble pen shell, or pinna nobilis. The giant mollusks can grow up to 4 feet wide. They play an important role filtering seawater and allowing other organisms to flourish. But around 2016, they started dying out as a pathogen spread. Sandro Dojmovic works with a group that manages Istria's protected areas and has been keeping tabs on the clams.
This was alive recently. Some unfortunately died, but we found new, small, but likely alive ones, probably from this year.
Dojmovic says some clams have been spotted around Spain and Italy. A local diver found 20 of them near Croatia last year. That was a big deal.
In the entire Adriatic on the Croatian side, until now, we knew about 10 to 15 living Pinna nobilis. The problem is that they are mostly individual Pinna nobilis, and it cannot reproduce itself. This finding of over 20 in one place is even more significant because they can probably reproduce here. And that is the next step for us to determine. Are they infected? Are they sick? Can they reproduce? And are there even more of them in the area?
This year, biologists managed to collect about 100 young specimens. They live in this aquarium about 30 miles away. We keep them here to provide them with the cleanest possible environment, says biologist Nicolina Primate. That means filtered water, free of parasites. Scientists say they hope the clams could one day return to the sea. It's too early to say what caused the clams to bounce back, but Croatia's government is funding research to find out.
Italy has officially informed China that it is leaving the Belt and Road Initiative, dismissing fears that decision could sour relations and damage the Italian economy. Without singling out Italy, China's foreign ministry reacted by emphasizing the enormous appeal and global influence of the BRI initiative, while firmly opposing efforts to, and I quote, smear and undermine the Belt and Road Initiative.
Italy has officially told China it is leaving the Belt and Road Initiative. That's according to government sources on Wednesday. Italy became the first and so far the only major Western nation to join the trade and investment program, ignoring warnings from the United States that it might allow China to take control of sensitive and vital infrastructure. However, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said when she took office last year that she wanted to withdraw from the deal. She said it had brought no significant gains to Italy. The 2019 accord expires in March 2024. An Italian government source said Rome would not be renewing the pact. China's Foreign Ministry's spokesperson Wang Wenbin told reporters on Thursday that the Belt and Road has enormous appeal and global influence, without singling out Italy for criticism.
China firmly opposes smearing and undermining cooperation in developing the Belt and Road Initiative and opposes confrontation and creating division among the camps.
More than 100 countries have signed agreements with China to cooperate on Belt and Road Initiative since it was launched in 2013.
Greece and Turkey, longtime adversaries, aim to forge a new chapter of improved relations. During the significant visit of Turkish President to Greece on the 7th of December, both nations committed to fostering friendly ties and addressing long-standing challenges, particularly in the Aegean Sea.
Historical foes Greece and Turkey hope to usher in a new era of closer ties. In a landmark visit of Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan to Greece on Thursday, they agreed to pursue good neighbourly relations and work on obstacles that have kept them apart, especially in the Aegean Sea. By their acrimonious standards, Thursday's summit was a remarkable love fest without precedents. It went on longer than expected. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis addressed Erdogan as Dear Tayyip, and Erdogan said he expected to receive Mitsotakis in Ankara. This was Erdogan on Thursday.
We want to turn the Aegean into a sea of peace and cooperation. As Turkey-Greece, we want to set an example to the whole world with the mutual steps we will take. I'm saying this openly. There is no problem between us that cannot be solved.
It was a far cry from his last visit in 2017, when both sides reeled off a litany of grievances stretching back to the crumbling days of the Ottoman Empire over a century ago. Chile relations thawed markedly after Greece swiftly dispatched aid in the wake of a devastating earthquake in Turkey in February. The two neighbours, who went to the brink of war in the 1990s, have long been at odds over issues including where their continental shelves start and end, energy resources, flights over the Aegean Sea, and the ethnically partitioned island of Cyprus.
A powerful explosion at an explosive store wreaked havoc in an industrial zone on Seychelles' main island, Mahé, causing extensive damage and prompting President Wavel Ramakalawan to declare a state of emergency on Thursday. The blast, compounded by heavy rains and flooding, resulted in widespread destruction, with steels covered in mud, debris and uprooted trees. Take a look at this report.
This is the aftermath of a blast at an explosive store on an industrial zone on the Seychelles' main island, Mahé. President Wavel Ramakalawan declared a state of emergency on Thursday. He was seen visiting the injured at a hospital after the explosion. The blast shook the island as heavy rains triggered flooding. Streets on the island were covered in deep mud and strewn with debris and uprooted trees. The president's office put out a statement asking everyone to stay at home. All schools will be closed and only workers in the essential services and persons travelling will be allowed free movement, the statement added. The government's official Visit Seychelles account on X said the international airport and ferries between its islands remained operational for tourists. The Seychelles is a major tourist destination. The country is made up of 115 islands and is the least populous country in Africa, with about 100,000 people.
Ivorian farmers faced severe damages to their cotton crops from an invasive species last year. In response, they enjoyed chemical solutions this year, but researchers caution that this is merely a temporary fix.
Cotton has been bountiful in Ivory Coast's fields this season. And for farmers like Issouf Kabe Koulibaly, that's a welcome reversal of fortunes.
Last year we had a disease in the cotton called jacid, which really devastated all our cotton crops. So we had no cotton last year.
The Indian cotton jacid appeared as if from nowhere across much of Western Central Africa's cotton belt. The tiny grasshopper-like pest injects a toxin into the plant that led to a near 25% production slump in the 2022 to 2023 season, year on year. Some countries lost over half their forecast harvest. This season, the use of rapidly trialled and approved new insecticides has kept the jacid at bay. Yaradiu Masoro says his last harvest was around 2/3 smaller than usual.
If the medicine hadn't worked, we wouldn't have had enough cotton this year. Thank God we think a solution has been found. Even if the jacid disease still exists this year, it is late on our cotton, and we already have succeeded in our harvest.
The crisis has highlighted a regional vulnerability to invasive species, but it has also emphasized a reliance on chemical solutions. Research shows that such pesticides will not protect crops in the long term. Cotonou Falaise is an agricultural advisor in the Korogo district.
Any product that is used on a pest over a long period of time, if there is no improvement in the product, at some point the pest will develop resistance to it.
Known cases of resistance in the jacid have been reported in India and Pakistan, according to an industry group. But in Ivory Coast, farmers need to balance the long-term consequences of pesticide use with the short-term need to put food on the table. Thierry Brevo of French Agricultural Research Centre CIRAD said farmers could not have afforded to lose another 30 to 50% of production, and that insecticides were the obvious choice. But he warned eventually these products won't work. He said the priority should be measures including developing pest-resistant cotton varieties and learning how to tackle jacids at different parts of their life cycle. Without such long-term solutions, researchers warn that West Africa's cotton bounce may be short-lived.
McDonald's aims to achieve its most rapid expansion in history by opening approximately 10,000 global restaurants by 2027. Take a look at this report.
McDonald's is set to supersize itself. The burger chain said Wednesday that it plans 10,000 new restaurants worldwide by 2027. That could make it the fast food giant's fastest ever period of expansion. The news came as McDonald's held a gathering for investors. It says many of the new outlets will be in overseas markets, with more than 3,500 just in China. The country is its second biggest market, and it recently struck a deal to gain greater control over its branches there. McDonald's has been largely unaffected by a choppy year for consumer spending in the US, thanks to its affordable menu. Chief Executive Chris Kempczynski said he was wary about making predictions for next year, but said the consumer had proved to be very resilient. Now the new expansion plan will see it hit about 50,000 restaurants worldwide by 2027. One analyst called the plan ambitious but exciting and said McDonald's has the capacity to pull it off. Among other initiatives, the chain is aiming to massively increase the number of people using its loyalty program. McDonald's is also partnering with Google Cloud to deploy AI systems in its restaurants. That should give it more visibility into each outlet, allowing it to identify cost savings and improve efficiency.
Lewis Hamilton called for a change at Formula One's governing body on Friday after what he said was unacceptable treatment of his Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff's wife Susie over an alleged confidentiality breach. The sport's most successful driver, a 7-time world champion, who finished third overall this season, spoke out at a press conference ahead of the end of the year prize-giving gala in Azerbaijan.
But it is, been a challenging week, I think. A disappointing week, really, to see that the governing body of our sport is has seeked to question the integrity of one of the most incredible female leaders we've ever had in our sport, and with Susie Wolff, without questioning, without any evidence, and then just saying sorry at the end, and that's just unacceptable. So we've got a lot of great people within the sport that are doing amazing work. There is a constant fight to really improve diversity and inclusion within the industry. But it seems that there are certain individuals that in the leadership within the FIA that every time we try and make a step forward, they're trying to pull us back, and that has to change. I think this is a global sport, and we have such an incredible opportunity and an actual responsibility to be leaders of change. And as we're traveling to all those countries around the world, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're pushing in the right direction.
Meanwhile, 2023 champion Max Verstappen says there is still room for improvement following a record-breaking season.
Realistically, of course, it can't be much better than what we have achieved. But I think it's not always about, trying to win 20 races. It's also about just trying to find improvements within yourself, within the car. And if that means next year, we have improved the car and we can fight for the championship again, but you only win 10 races, that's also fine, It's just been also that, the competition around us has been quite up and down. One weekend it was this team, then the other week it was another team. So I expect next year, people are learning a lot with this new regulation as well, that it naturally will be, quite a bit closer.
Embracing the festive spirit, the Sarajevo Festival of Lights has brought a dazzling glow to the botanical garden of the National Museum in the Bosnian capital, just in time for Christmas. The light displays in the National Museum and the Botanical Garden beautifully reflect the treasures housed within the museum. With one of the world's largest collections of butterflies, the museum's thematic influence extends to all 12 items showcased in the Festival of Lights. Running till the 1st of March, the festival features light installations that celebrate Bosnia's rich culture and natural heritage. Drawing inspiration from renowned international events in cities like New York, London and Berlin, Sarajevo's festival is radiant testament to the city's resilience and diverse history. There is some great news for Harry Potter fans, better known as Potterheads. Get ready for an enchanting experience as the new interactive exhibition Harry Potter Visions of Magic debuts in Cologne, Germany. Developed by Warner Brothers and Neon, the immersive show takes visitors on a magical journey through iconic Harry Potter locations such as the Ministry of Magic, Nocturne Alley and the Hall of Prophecy. Even the actors Oliver and James, known for playing Fred and George Weasley, have explored the exhibition.
Like where we are now, it's just like one of the film sets. You know, you've got the lights from above, you've got everything from around you, and the same with quite a few of the other rooms as well, like the room requirements and things like that. So the guys are going to really enjoy being part of the Potter experience.
Absolutely blow my mind. Like honestly, the technology in here is something which I've never seen anywhere else.
On the eve of her 14th birthday, Asha Mhatre was waiting for a cake that her diplomat father had promised. Except Ravindra Mhatre never showed up. That's because nearly 40 years ago, Ravindra Mhatre was killed in cold blood in the UK. Multiple people were charged with the murder of Ravindra Mhatre, but who was the man who pulled the trigger? And 4 decades on, what is it that we have learned? News 9 Plus has published a full-blown investigative piece on the killer of Ravindra Mhatre. Where is he now? And the possible impact of his whereabouts. You can watch the full show on News 9 Plus application. Meanwhile, here's a look at the snippet.
I have not been told any official version. I know whatever I saw. Nobody's contacted us to see whether we are alive or dead. Not a peep out of subsequent governments even after that.
He's the person who actually pulled the trigger, killing Mr. Mhatre.
Is he still alive?
49-year-old Birmingham-based
Indian diplomat vanishes.
On birthday,
daughter waits
for missing father.
KLA claims responsibility.
Demands
Kashmiri separatists.
Maqbool Bhatt's release. Abducted diplomat.
Found murdered in Leicestershire.
After Indian diplomat Ravindra Mhatre's killing in 1984, 3 kidnappers were arrested by UK and Maqbool Bhatt was immediately hanged by India. But who was the person who actually pulled the trigger and killed Ravindra Mhatre? This has forever remained a mystery for the last 40 years. News 9 Plus has been investigating this case for last several months to understand the chain of events. For the very first time in our investigation, we unmask the killer of Ravindra Mhatre. The killing was done by JKLF terrorist Masrat Iqbal Malik, who has been hiding in Kotli of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir since last 40 years. This has also been verified by both Hashim Qureshi and Shabir Chaudhry.
मुसरत इकबाल था, वो इस केस पे था इन्वॉल्व, लेकिन उसकी वो किराए के तौर पे ना अमानुल्लाह के घर में भी रहता था। उसने कहा कि अमान साहब, मुझे लगता है कि पुलिस हमें घेर रही है, हम क्या करें? अमानुल्लाह के अल्फाज थे, गोली मारो से और फेंक दो। मैंने कहा यार तुम किसको क्यों मार रहे हो उसको गोली? उधर एक तो मकबूल भट्ट को फांसी देंगे और फिर दूसरा ये बेगुनाह आदमी है, इसको क्यों मारोगे गोली?
I can say that killing order of the killing was given by Amanullah Khan. But he felt at the time that police will be able to arrest the kidnappers, and that will disgrace the party, and those people will be in trouble, and maybe JKLF could be in trouble. This he confessed to me when he was in hospital. He had a lung cancer, and at that critical moment I asked him, I said, who ordered to kill him? He was vulnerable at the time, and he said to me, he said, yes, I ordered it.
Stop searching, start streaming. Download the world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of the Bulletin. Thank you very much for watching. You have a great day ahead. This is me, Neha, signing off.
It was my 14th birthday.
On birthday, daughter waits
Home missing father.
He was carrying a cake for his daughter.
49-year-old Birmingham-based
Indian diplomat vanishes.
He was grabbed and bundled into a car by 4 assailants.
KLA claims responsibility. Demands Kashmiri separatists.
Makbul Bhatt's release.
गोली मारो उसे, गोली मारो उसे और फेंक दो.
And within 3 days, they shot him dead.
Abducted diplomat.
Found murdered in Leicestershire.
I said, who ordered to kill him? To me, he said, yes, I ordered it.
And he never came home.
Stop searching, start streaming. Download the world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus, ahead of the curve. China won't let us rest easy on our borders, but they will keep flooding our markets. What does Xi Jinping really want?
I think he wants the Indian market, no doubt about it. It's really a matter of showing their dominance.
India's great Chinese conundrum.
Nobody can contain it. Not the United States, not China, not anybody else.